And welcome everybody to another brand new episode of Red Maryland Radio on the Red Maryland Network, coming to you from the Red Maryland Command Bunker. I am Brian Griffiths. Joining me from the Jim Plunkett studio, Greg Klein.
Good to be here. Good to be here. We got a big show for you tonight, and we've got a very special guest who's going to join us. Brian, why don't you introduce our guest who is standing by?
Joining us on our very first videoed conferenced in guest,
which will totally work. Don't you
Maryland Radio. Joining us live from his home in Westminster, State Senator Justin Reedy. Senator Reedy, can you hear? There you are.
They did a 3, 2, 1 countdown before they let me in.
Oh, is that it? Okay. All right.
That's fun. Well, Senator, thank you very much for joining us. How are you and your family holding up right now?
We're doing fine. I ventured out today for the first time in a few days to go. I'm the designated grocery buyer. My wife has a few immunity issues that just want to be careful. So I went out today for the first time in a few days, and it is a different tone than the last time I was out. And I'm pleased to report I was able to procure toilet paper. Only one package. I was very, I was very polite to my fellow shoppers. But, yeah, it was interesting. A lot of pressure going out because I'm not usually the one that shops for groceries, and so the pressure on not forgetting something. I think I forgot one thing, but it's something that wasn't dire, so that's good. You know, you're trying to go down the list. You're also trying to maximize your coupons. You know how that goes. So
what are you up to these days when you don't? I mean, you were planning to still be legislating at this point in time, but
yeah, and thank goodness we're out of that. That was. I'm not going to say there's anything that's a silver lining to any of this because it's obviously very bad. But concluding early wasn't the worst thing in the world for the taxpayers, although they still managed to push through.
You're getting a little ahead of yourself here.
Yeah, I definitely not spiking the football. But we probably killed a few things by getting out early. Just goes to show you don't need a 90-day session because they still passed about 600 bills. So you could do probably a 70-day or 65-day session and be just fine.
Yeah, you don't need rules. You don't need hearings. You don't need anything.
Yeah, right. It's really easy when you don't have to follow it. You know, the public doesn't have to be in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about that for a second. There were 650 bills passed in 3 days, which is a breakneck speed, even for the Maryland General Assembly. It's a breakneck speed for just about any legislative body. How challenging was it to try to even keep up with what you were talking about on any given day on the Senate floor?
Well, it was challenging, and I never like it when politicians say, I led the charge. I was a leader in the fight to try to slow things down. Several of us were on the Republican side. And the frustration really is just that some of the 650 bills had passed one house before. So it wasn't like it was all brand new in 3 days. So in fairness, there was things that had hearings that we'd been debating for a while. But yeah, definitely, we were told we're staying to get critical stuff done. We're going to stay to get the budget done. And you have the operating and the capital budget. And you have, counties have some bills that are important, especially commissioner counties like Carroll. There are things we have to get passed so they can continue doing things like borrowing money and things like that are important. And there were even things that agencies needed to kind of, continue government. But it was just frustrating to see so much garbage and fluff. And I'll tell you, particularly in the House of Delegates, there were things flying out of there that some of which made it through the Senate, but a lot of things didn't. There were stuff like plastic bag bans at a time when people are, trying to shop for groceries in a huge crowds. And then we find out, coronavirus, canvas and coronavirus, not a great mix. So that was frustrating to see that be on the House floor and fly out of there on the weekend where we're supposed to be trying to get the budgets done and critical things. Tax increases, particularly regressive ones like almost doubling the cigarette tax on, which I view that as basically a tax on the working poor and poor people. I'm not a fan of smoking, but they also put a giant tax on vaping, which so if there's a public health issue, you want people vaping, not smoking, if they're going to do something. Anyway, stuff like that was very frustrating, no question. I feel like we got up and made great arguments, but at the same time, when you're outnumbered, there's only so much you can do.
Well, and also in the Senate, you hadn't fully implemented the video, so not only was the public largely excluded, the hard pressed press corps was getting limited coverage because everybody's covering the corona, and they're doing everything except sweeping the floors. They're trying to cover everything. But you also, people couldn't even watch from afar. I know you guys kind of jerry-rigged it a couple of days. I mean, I can't imagine how frustrating that was, making those arguments, as Republicans largely have done for many years, have made the point. If you listen to what's going on the House floor, if you listen to the arguments being made, you guys have a tradition in both chambers, frankly, of winning with arguments, making good arguments. I mean, how frustrating is it knowing that you're kind of beating your head against the wall on a lot of this stuff?
I mean, we had a few wins, which made it feel, that you're, at least it's good that we're there. I mean, and I'll give the press credit, actually. I know we're not big fans of the Baltimore Sun all the time, but their reporters, if their reporters had not been there, them and then you got guys like Brian Sears on the Daily Record, but the Daily Record is a really great publication, but the average voter, the average person doesn't get that. That's more of a business and law periodical, and he does a great job, but it's limited. So, I mean, the Baltimore Sun, actually, their two reporters that were working, it was helpful because they tried, but you can only cover so much. And, look, I mean, the streaming, we had streaming audio, but it actually exposed the General Assembly as really, really behind the times relative to our IT infrastructure, because you got to be with too many people access the streaming audio at once, it would crash. It wasn't like sinister, it's just incompetence. So, and when I say incompetence, they were down to like quarter staff too. So because of the coronavirus. So it was very frustrating. I mean, thank goodness we have social media. We have the ability to go on Facebook Live and say things and do things. Next year will be much better. I thought it was great that the House could clip videos of these key debates and show the debate over different amendments. That's going to be a tool that we need to take full advantage of in future sessions.
Well, there's a lot I know we want to ask, but and we can't go through everything that was passed. So, and then there's some questions I certainly have post on how all this is going to play out from the session. First off, because we're still pouring through this, people still don't know exactly what happened. So what were some of the biggest victories from a Republican conservative perspective during those fateful 4 or 5 days when all this stuff got done?
I think some victories are as follows. Number one, the tax increase that passed, or the tax increases that passed, while nobody likes hearing, it could have been a lot worse when something bad happens. But the truth is we did defeat, of course, there was the outlandish sales tax proposal that I don't think ever really was going to go anywhere, the expanding it to services. But there were a number of tax increases that were shelved or watered down to where all we had was these tobacco and vaping taxes and digital downloads and digital platforms. And I obviously voted and fought against all of those, but it was about $400 million in new taxes instead of $3 billion. And I think the governor's going to veto that. And I think it's going to be an interesting fight, particularly on digital downloads in the veto. But going back to victories, I wouldn't put that as number one, but you do have to factor in that the ability of us to really make very good arguments and get people fired up around the state help to water all that way down. Big victory. The plastic bag on overall policy, the plastic bag ban, it's just a stupid thing. So it's stupid, and it's not something that the state needs to be getting involved in. You need to incentivize people to recycle or go away from plastic, not just ban them and then allow retailers to charge you for a paper bag. That's not the answer. That dying was good. I think one of the biggest policy things was there was a lot of sanctuary state related stuff that I think was primed to pass this year. And with the exception of a couple little reporting things and there's something where the MVA now that ICE can't access MVA without a warrant, that did get through, which is not great. But that's a pretty small thing relative to having a full-on sanctuary state. So that was a big win that was defeated. And we'll get in. I imagine we're going to get into the really big policy and spending bill that came out in a minute. But we had the way that got amended, there were some good things that happened to that bill, even though I still think it's the wrong move for our state by far. So, unfortunately, we killed a couple bad gun bills too. There's some gun bills that got through, but there's a really bad. There was a gun bill trying to basically criminalize people. If you have your gun stolen and didn't report it, you could be going to jail on a first offense. And so we were able to basically neuter that bill, and we killed a couple other like gun registration bills. So there was some good stuff on that side. Obviously, with the good comes the bad. We had some bad gun bills through too. But so that's overall we tried our best, and I feel like we made some progress in that regard.
Well, let's talk about Kirwan. You brought it up. You hinted at it a second ago.
Yeah.
Obviously, that did pass overwhelmingly. In the Senate, there were 6 Republicans who did vote for it. I'm certainly not going to ask you to talk about their vote on that. But it obviously is the biggest policy that came out of this session. It had a massive price tag attached to it. And as you mentioned earlier, it was passed at a time where there was no more public input and where we already saw some of the effects of this coronavirus pandemic coming down on our economy. What do you think are the chances that Governor Hogan's going to veto that? And what chances do you think, now that we have seen some of these job numbers come out and we've seen kind of the damage that the economy has taken in the past 3 weeks, do you think that if the governor vetoes it, there's any chance that some of your colleagues in the Senate on the Democratic side say, maybe this isn't the right time to pass this?
Well, I hope so. One of the key amendments that we got, so the bill as it came out of and I actually read 3 different versions of this bill, all the pages. It was like 200-page bill. And when I say I read it all, I read through it all. Some of there's probably 90 pages of it that's spending formulas and things like that. So when I say I read it, but it's not like I had to read every word, but I read every page and looked at everything and found a lot of policy things that were wrong and are still not quite right. I found some good things too. On some, at least the aims of some of it are good, but as it came out of the House, it was actually even worse than as it was introduced, as far as they added more money, and they added money to help certain jurisdictions that, have been underfunding their schools, frankly, according to how the General Assembly defines funding your schools. And they were adding money to help them out so that their liability wouldn't be as great. But as it came into the Senate, there were amendments we were able to get on dealing with some of the classroom management and classroom environment issues. I don't think they went far enough with it, but there were some amendments to that regard. One of the big amendments that was put on the bill in the Senate was this 1-year trigger, that if our budget next year is, I think it's 7% or more down from this year as far as our budget income projections, then it's an automatic revisitation of all these formulas and all of this spending. Now, candidly, while that is a good amendment, and it's going to be good if they override it, that's in there, I still feel like that they'll just, if they want to, they'll just come in and say, we're going to raise taxes and get around that. I do think they're going to have to revisit. There's no way coming back next year. Our budget may be in a situation, and the governor had over $1 billion rainy day fund in the budget, and that's going to get eaten through very quickly through obviously no fault of his own or any mismanagement, but it's going to be probably a $2 billion budget deficit next year. So they would be wise to just sustain a veto if the governor does veto, and I think he will. I'm not based on any insider information. They'd be wise to sustain that veto and just recalibrate, because my attitude about it, there were some other amendments we got on that were good. We preserved, the House tried to take the governor's ability out to basically control who gets appointed to this oversight board. There is an oversight board. It's not nearly probably as strong as I'd like to see it. It's still more bureaucracy, but at least there is one. But the House actually tried to say the governor couldn't veto people on it, even though he's supposed to appoint them. So we got rid of all that. So thankfully, there's still some level of accountability. Again, it's not all that strong. But the bottom line is, it's such a complex 200-page bill, and even the good reforms that are in it, like reorienting the schools to focus on making sure, making sure that we're getting outcomes instead of just focusing on how much money we're spending. There's some of that language in there. There's some good reforms. But my biggest problem with the bill, in addition to how much money they were spending, which is billions and billions of dollars every year more, my biggest problem with it was you're still having the same infrastructure implement these reforms that isn't able to implement any reforms now. And so that's always the challenge with education policy, is even when you come up with some good sort of free market ideas that get put into something like this, you still have the same sort of calcified bureaucratic structure that's implementing it. And so that's a big issue as well. I mean, So there's the amount of spending for me, and also the fact that while I said they tried to address classroom environment to some extent, there's not nearly enough in there specifying how important discipline is. And I tried to get an amendment on to make sure that when a student is unruly or causing problems, the teacher should be a meaningful part of the discussion of getting that child back into the classroom. Maybe not a full veto over it, but they should be a meaningful part of that discussion along with parents and guidance counselor and principal. Right now what happens is you send a kid out, he's coming back like maybe in the same class or certainly the next day. And sometimes parents, frankly, aren't backing up teachers, and they'll complain to administrators fold. So a lot of that was not in Kirwan. So I think it will be vetoed. And I gave you a long answer there. There's so much in it, but it was awful timing, but it was just too much spending. I could support a little bit more education spending. I could support targeted increases in spending, depending on how it's defined and how it's administered and all that. But this was like, it's just no way. It's just terrible. So, I think that it will be vetoed. I think they will override the veto, but then they're going to have to set to work figuring out how to pay for it. That's what I think is going to happen. And I don't know how we can pay for it right now.
Well, let me, I mean, we could talk about Kirwan all night. I'd love to know what the talk inside the caucus was when this all went down. Feel free.
Sure.
But my understanding, I mean, I'm not going to interrupt you, but my question is going to be, the governor mentioned that none of these bills have been presented to him yet. So according to his recent press conference, they haven't been presented to him yet. So the 30 days that the clock is not running. He says he's not looking at them. Probably not. I think he's aware that Kirwan passed. And I'm sure he has some definite ideas about some of these things. Is there some sort of agreement between assembly leadership and the governor as to when these bills would be presented? There's talk about maybe coming back in late May. It's very possible we could be in the same situation we are right now at that point in time. Certainly, this emergency is not likely to be over. God willing, it will be. It's not entirely up to God, unfortunately. Exactly. But 30 days before late May, which means if the purpose of reconvening is in part to override any gubernatorial vetoes, these bills would have to be presented to the governor probably sometime this month. And my question to you is, so this timing becomes really important. Is there some sort of agreement that you're aware of between leadership and the governor's office as to when these bills will be presented to him and start that 30-day clock?
My understanding, based on some information I just got, is not that there's any sort of underground agreement, but I think that as a courtesy to the governor, they actually, and I'll give the leadership some credit here, they actually, as a courtesy to him managing this crisis, said, we will wait till April 6th to give you the bills, which I think is actually a nice bipartisan gesture. I know we roll our eyes sometimes when we talk about bipartisanship and it's used as a cudgel, but I think in this case, it is a legitimate sort of, we know you're probably going to veto some stuff. We also know that right now is not the time you need to be having to roll up your sleeves and get into the nitty gritty of not so much Kirwan. I think probably he knows what he'll do on Kirwan, but other issues. And so I think that my understanding is that's part of why they haven't been given to him yet. And so people are listening, April 6th would have been sine die.
Right.
That would have been the end of session, was April 6th. And so then the governor has, there are ways that bills can be presented to the governor before that in a real normal timeline. You can present bills to the governor before April 6th, even if you stay in session, but that's
wasn't there some thought that with some of these bills, perhaps even with Kirwan, that would have been done so that the governor would have to make a decision during session, that his veto could have been overridden during session?
I think that was the original plan. Obviously, as things got worse with coronavirus, that went out the window. And I think rightfully so, in the sense that even looking at it from a left perspective, I think it was right to wait on those things. Would have been right to wait on a whole lot of things and not pass them, in my opinion. but they didn't rush it to get it to his desk, or they sort of ran out of time. I mean, because they couldn't stay in forever. They tried.
So then talk of a potential special session in late May.
So yeah, that's interesting, because I've had a lot of people ask me this question recently that I've talked to. I don't know what we would need to go back for. the idea of a special session was if there were some key things that, because you really can't convene a special session to override vetoes. I mean, you could wait till January to do it. I think
well, sure, you could wait, and probably absolutely should.
You should. Well, of course you should. I mean, we passed everything that you would need to run.
And we've had special sessions to override vetoes before.
Well, you have to have usually another excuse, though. Usually you have to have another excuse for why you're getting in there. And then, just so happens we have to override some vetoes,
Right. And I'm pretty sure with the state of emergency, they have plenty of wiggle room to try to come up with an excuse.
Well, they could say, hey, I mean, of course, the governor would, if the governor needed something that he couldn't do with his current authority, which I think is unlikely, but it could happen. They could say we need to go back in for that.
Right.
Although having a partisan fight over a veto override is not going to be a good look.
It's not a good look.
Right now, us getting back in, number one, I don't think we need to go back in. But even late May may not be. I'm hopeful we're going to see by then that some of the reins are getting loosened and that sort of thing as far nationwide. But we don't know right now. So I don't think so. It's possible, but I'm starting to think that hope of having one is fading. And when I say hope, I'm not talking about my hope, but if someone was hoping to have a special session, I think that is fading pretty fast.
Okay. Well, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
By the way, you should ask Governor Ehrlich about having a special session just to override his veto.
I'm not saying it didn't happen.
I remember years ago that I had some involvement with where they fired the Public Service Commission. And
that's right. That was 06.
We were in the Court of Appeals 2 weeks later. So yeah, it can happen.
That's right.
But anyway, so that's good. That's encouraging. Well, let me ask you then, and I know you're just a state senator. You don't have any control what's going on in the state, as none of us do, except for the governor. Do you have any sense about, number one, and I'm kind of tongue in cheek here, but I mean, I'm only a little bit. Do you have any sense about when these things could change? And do you have any idea who is really in that inner circle that's in the bunker with the governor right now, making these very serious policy decisions that are having, saving lives and having very serious effects on every Marylander's life for now and in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think how to answer that question. I have some ideas of probably who's around him. I do know he really is listening to medical professionals, healthcare professionals, people like Fran Phillips, who's the deputy at Department of Health. She's been in public health for like 30 years. I think the governor has, for the most part, taken a pretty smart tack of having kind of a middle course. I mean, I know just this week it's gotten more severe, but they've shut down non-essential businesses. At least you can't have your physical plant open. But it's for every person I see on social media saying, it's really no big deal. It's not any different than a flu, which I think now we kind of all acknowledge it ain't the flu. Whether you think in a couple of months we're going to look back and think we overreacted or not, I think it's pretty clear there's no medical professional that's advising the president or governors saying this is no big deal. Like they all say this is a big deal. Sure. And you can quibble about whether you should do X or Y. I see a lot of people on social media, for every guy who's like, this is an excuse for martial law. You also have the guy going, why hasn't they shut the whole state down? And it's not even a right left thing. It's a very strange mix you see in arguing. So I think trying to take that middle tack of, bars and restaurants serve, carry out. We're not closing everybody down. It's a tough look when you feel like lives are at stake. It's a tough thing to do. I think he's listening to a lot of medical professionals. I think, the cabinet and the chief of staff and folks like that are very close to him on this. I think probably everybody wants to get to May 1st. Everything I hear from people, not just in this state, but other places is, and even now the president has sort of, I think, he was holding out hope it could be sooner than that. And I think he got a lot of flack. I think that was more aspirational, the whole Easter thing. I think it wasn't necessarily saying, I'm going to open it all up on Easter. It was saying, be great to do it then.
I think it was also, and this is one of my frustrations with the governor, I think it was also a recognition that there's a cost to flattening the curve.
No question.
In real terms and very human term. I mean, Senator, you saw the numbers that came out today. In the last 2 weeks, we've lost 140,000 jobs in this state, which are all the jobs that were created under the first term of the Hogan administration.
It is, and you hope that
it's a big deal.
It is. It absolutely is a catastrophic big deal, and you guys know this, but some of your listeners may not. State legislators are not full time and staff. So I have another job, and I'm thankful it's a kind of a sales based sort of job that I can still do. Sales are tough right now, but I can at least build relationships and do Zoom calls and talk to people on the phone and cold call. And hey, people are answering their phones because they don't have anything else to do. But I feel very fortunate in that respect that I have a job that kind of is not, I haven't lost, where I know a lot of my constituents, and I'm every day fielding calls and emails from people that are trying to figure out what to do, whether they're a business owner or somebody who works for a small business or they're in the gig economy or whatever. So no question, there's a lot of suffering that goes with this, and I don't think we can take it lightly for sure. I don't think that's necessarily what's happened. I don't think that's happened at the state level, but I understand your point, some of the points you've made, Greg, and I think all of us have to have the attitude that this is a sacrifice for a lot of people, and it's sort of why you don't hear the normal, even the big bill that passed Congress. I know there's a lot of weight. There's going to be a lot of stuff that ends up being like a waste in that, or at least a lot of high profile examples of.
Could not be.
But the government is the one, it has shut everything down. Right. So it is not the same as when like banks have made bad investments and the government's bailing them out. This is a different setup. And so we have to try to get through as quickly as possible, but as safely as possible. I do think people are not going to, this idea that I've heard people say, well, we should shut it down for 6 months. That's not, I don't think you can do that. So
we won't have an economy left. We might not.
No, and I don't think people will.
They wouldn't. You're right about that too.
I think though that people could, if you can say to people, there is and I think at some point, that's why I think
6 months.
I think May 1st, I think that goal, I'm not speaking for anybody but myself and what I've kind of heard in my.
What are you doing?
But I think May 1st is when you'd be able to not say we're starting again May 1st, but say on May 1st, we can look and say, have we crested and started to come back down? Can we look ahead to mid to late May and say that's when we could probably start loosening up some of the restrictions? And the other thing is the private sector is going gangbusters trying to find a solution for this, a vaccine or at least therapeutics. And I hear good reports every day about things, but I don't know any better than you guys do whether they're real, and certainly a vaccine that you think will help but isn't tested properly could be just as bad as a disease. So you have to be careful. I'm hopeful that we'll get an idea by early May kind of where the finish line might be. But I know people are upset and they're restless and people are scared too. There's no question about it.
Well, Senator, you have been very generous with your time tonight. If any of your constituents or anybody needs to reach out to you during this time, how can they do that?
Yeah, you're welcome to. My Facebook page is facebook.com/Senator Reedy, Ready. And my Twitter handle is Justin Reedy. And email, if you want to email me, senatorreedy@gmail.com is an email that comes right to me. And my staff, our staffs are working, all of us are working remotely, but they're doing a great job of trying to help too, to, cut through red tape. I will tell people, as frustrating as it is, some of the things that have come out at the state level that you can call for help, whether it's something unemployment related or something, one of these new programs, it is true that they are understaffed and overwhelmed too. So I've had some constituents upset they haven't gotten a call back right away. And I said, I'd love for you to get a call back right away, but it may be that it may take a couple days because they're working through a lot. But everybody's, I think we just have to all pray. I think buying into the whole social distancing thing is the right thing to do right now. And we just have to, I think, pray and hope that there can be some additional solutions and we can find a way forward sooner rather than later. So
amen to that. Senator Justin Reedy, always great to talk to you. You guys stay safe. Hope your family does well, and we'll talk to you on the other side of all this.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Senator. We're going to go ahead and go to a break now. When we come back, we will talk more about the current state of the pandemic here in Maryland. We're also going to talk a lot about elections and how a lot of things that are changing and moving pieces related to this pandemic. Stick with us. You are listening to Red Maryland Radio on the Red Maryland Network. Hi, this is Brian Griffiths, the founder of Maryland Podcast Month. Maryland Podcast Month was founded in 2018 to draw attention to all of the great podcasts and podcasters here in Maryland. And during this time of social distancing, there is no better time to start learning more about locally produced podcasts. Shows like my podcast, Red Maryland Radio, Eye on Annapolis, the Conduit Street Podcast, JB's Drive-In Podcast, the Maryland Crabs, Quality Time, the Society Fringe Players, and more are still putting out fresh content. Visit MarylandPodcastMonth.com to learn more about these great Maryland podcasts. That's MarylandPodcastMonth.com. And we thank you for your support of local content.
Come on, there are plenty of amazing women politicians.
Name one.
Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Awful.
How is she awful?
Hates freedom.
Wherever you are, whatever you do, have a nice day. Sky Radio all the way.
We are back. Red Maryland Radio on the Red Maryland Network. I am Brian. He is Greg.
Good to be here. That was a little clip from Ain't Back Yet, which is, I thought, apropos.
You got it.
Thank you. By the way, sorry. I'm sorry.
No, good. No, good.
And thank you for Senator Reedy for coming on. He was very gracious with the time. We could have talked his ear off for 45 minutes. We didn't do that. I gave him the opportunity. Go deeper. I know some of our folks in the chat wanted to know. I kind of do too, but we're trying to be polite. He's a guest.
Yeah.
And we've known Justin for a long time, and I thought I think his pretty well-reasoned criticism speaks for itself.
Indeed.
And by the way, what he talked about with the bills being presented and the time, that's not in the news anywhere. That's the only place I've heard that.
That is important news. Broken here on the show tonight. So that is good to know.
So these bills are going to be in front of the governor. According to the governor, come April 6th, if that's the timeline we're talking about.
Right.
April 6th, we're going to be in the worst of this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because the governor said, a week and a half ago, in 2 weeks, or a week ago, in 2 weeks, we're going to be as bad as New York. Okay. So heading into the worst of this crisis, and they're going to start the clock running on him and I know his staff's looking at it, and I know, even though the governor said he's not looking at it, he's got some pretty good ideas, but he's going to have to issue vetoes, hopefully, as the senator said, hopefully, and I think that is aspirational. That certainly does fit in the timelines with what we're hearing maybe on the federal level or other things. Maybe come early May, things will start to open up, but it's clearly a distraction and an unwelcome one. Maybe the legislature can't hold it off any longer than that. But
I mean, realistically, they wouldn't normally be presenting the bills until at least April 7th, once session is over. Like we've talked about in the past. But I don't know. I don't know based on rule. I don't know based on the Constitution if they can hold off longer than that. If there's anything. Let's face it. Our Constitution, our standing rules of how state government works, of how the General Assembly works, are not built for things like this. These are not the worst case scenarios that are built into the state constitution. So right. I have to assume that there has to be some sort of leeway and flexibility on this. At the very least, if they are delaying till April 6th till the normal end of session is already an extension past what the normal status quo would be for ending the session. So, I mean, if there's enough leeway to push it off as long as they have, theoretically, they could push it off a little more. And of course, that would be up to legislative leadership, whose judgment has been questionable.
I mean, Kiefer Mitchell's got to be doing something. So he's still getting a paycheck. So he's got to be doing something. And
he's the governor's top advisor.
Yeah. I think he's always been. He's his legislative. I've always said for years he's the closest advisor to the governor. People give me crap for that, but I'm telling you it's true. So, but I don't know. What do you want to go right into? Let's go. Let's
go into it
on the coronavirus thing. Okay, so from last week to this week, we've sheltered in place.
Yes.
The governor had this press conference on Monday. I tweeted a couple things about the press conference.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Aaron Cox from the Washington Post, who used to be at the Baltimore Sun, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. It was Capital before that, actually.
It was Capital before that. Excuse me. Was tweeting from it, mentioned something about, referred to him as the comforter in chief. And I tweeted back and I said, look, I watched this press conference. There wasn't anything comforting about watching that press conference. Okay. It was doom and gloom. You got angry and forgive me for saying so. And perhaps understandably, he was somewhat righteous, talking about how, we have to do this. We have to go further. I'm going to call the state police to enforce this now. We have to do this. We got to save lives. If it's, he didn't go as far as saying if it saved one life, it's worth it. Though it's hard not to think that that's very far from the mindset of the current policy making that's going on with the governor. So, if you're someone who it's funny, Senator Reedy talked about the dichotomy was not left versus right. I think the dichotomy that we're seeing very much is, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in a second. It depends on subjectively which worldview you're in.
Right.
Okay. And I'll give an example from my own family here in a second. But if you're somebody who's worried about getting the disease, you're not worried about your paycheck. You're not worried about, paying the bills. You're a federal employee or you're retired and you're more worried about getting this disease or this disease spreading or people dying in parking lots because they don't have a respirator for them at the hospital, then you're happy to see what the governor's doing. If you're somebody who is part of the growing population of private sector unemployed folks, and by the way, Senator Reedy talked about some delays. I'm hearing now people who fought, so these 80,000 people who in the last week filed unemployment claims, they're getting an email back from the unemployment board, who I'm sure is working as hard as they can. I'm not saying they're not.
They're almost certainly on minimal staff. They're on telework too.
I'm hearing 6 to 8 weeks to process these things.
Oh Lord!
Before people start getting their result. Now, if that's half true, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, these people aren't out of work, and the senator acknowledges these people aren't out of work because people stopped going to businesses because of the virus or people are sick because of the virus. They went because the government shut them down, and the government shut it down in advance of this spreading more widely. And I'm not saying that's not the wrong thing. So if you're kind of sensitive to that worldview, which I'm an attorney. I talk with business guys all the time. I hear what they're going through. I see people out of work. I see what my wife's company's trying to do. They're all scrambling, trying to stay alive, and a lot of them aren't going to,
right,
economically. So if that was your biggest fear, more than getting this disease, that wasn't what the governor was saying. Was not very comforting. What the health person said, months. It's not very comforting. And what I said was, look, for a lot of Marylanders, not in total, not everybody, but for a lot of Marylanders, they're sacrificing a lot to bend this curve down. Okay. For a lot of Marylanders, the sacrifice, the economic hardship, and the human toll that will have will be greater for them individually than getting the disease would be. I've been saying that for 2 weeks on the show. I think that's just a reality. For tens of thousands of Marylanders, that will be the case. And that's what I said. And it got interpreted, and Aaron got very excited because she thought I was saying, I was like this lieutenant governor of Texas who's saying old people ought to risk death to go out and keep the economy strong. Or I'm one of these American greatness guys that says, well, we need a strong economy to keep America great. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. That I was a nut ready to be picked. Right. And suddenly Aaron Cox thinks I'm a leading GOP voice. The only time she thought that before was when I disagreed with the governor on the Taney statue, which she put me on the front page. I understand how that game works. And when I explained to her, no, I'm talking about for some people, this is the reality. She kind of backed down. Interestingly, I mentioned to you this off air. I got an email from the New York Times from who was it here? Jennifer Steinhauer, who wanted to interview me. I didn't respond to it because I knew exactly what the game is. Look, it's very clear what the media is doing. When the president said we don't want the cure to be worse than the disease, they lambasted him. Anybody who suggests that the economic harm, that we should even talk about whether the economic harm exceeds the benefit of bending this curve down, they're evil, greedy, terrible people. Okay. Now it's interesting. When Aaron Cox reported today that 80,000 people filed first-time unemployment, she used the term vaporized when it was 120,000 jobs in the state gone, which I found kind of interesting. Anyway, so this is dichotomy. If I can, Brian, if you'll indulge me just for
you
a second. So I got this email from, I won't say who it is because she didn't give me permission to do it. But I think it's someone very close to me who is a nurse. And if you're in this world, if you're in this bubble, if you're sympathetic to this view, which I think many people are, most people are, I think this is where the governor and the people around him are. Here's what she said. So I'll clue you in on PPE use in a small community hospital. This is where she works. All staff have been issued one regular mask to use all day, every day until its integrity is compromised. And one N95 makes mask to use only when caring for COVID suspect or COVID positive patient and to use until its integrity is compromised. I mean, these are the risks these people are taking. You hear these kind of stories all the time. We wear no disposable gowns over our scrubs with double gloves and then take the gowns off after patient care, put in hamper for laundry to wash to be able to use again. We do have COVID positive patients and we give care to patients that are not truthful when being screened that turn out to be COVID positive. It's scary. Soon there will be ventilator patients in our same day surgery area because the ICU is filling up. It's new foreign territory for all of us at work. But since March 12th, there have been nobody's called out sick. And this is what she tells me. This is why I'm a nurse, to give back aid and comfort to others, no matter what they may or may not happen to me. And the feeling of scared sick patient holding my hand or having faith in our team while they're put to sleep by anesthesia is so gratifying. I'll always step up against these viruses and bacterias. The news reporter is just driving me crazy. So, this is a heroic kind of response from our first responders. And that's my sister. Okay. I'll say that. Okay. So look, hearing things like that, which we hear all the time and even worse, of course we want to do everything we can to do this. Now, my brother, who I mentioned before, he's in his third week of unemployment. Luckily, he got employed 3 weeks ago. So his application got processed pretty quick. But even when the economy comes back, who knows how long it'll be before he gets that job. Okay. He's one of these guys, like a lot of people in America, who, is a blue collar working class guy who came out of the Great Recession, having a tough time trying to, he's always been gainfully employed and he's a skilled person, but it's not easy for folks like that. I mean, this is, he's a big Trump guy now. Obviously, he's a classic kind of Trump guy in a lot of ways. Okay, this if you ever read the book Hillbilly Elegy, and these kind of folks that and the misery that was caused by blue collar unemployment, that's kind of the world that he's in, and this is what's going to happen. This is what's happening to folks as well. So if you're in that bubble, and I hear a lot of that, private sector employers and that kind of stuff, you have kind of a different view. So I don't know. It's tough. I think
a lot of
just to put a button on this, and I'll let
Sure.
you. And I've taken a lot of time, and I appreciate your patience. I just wish, and this was really the only point I made about the governor's speech on Monday. I wish the governor would acknowledge that. I really do. I really wish the governor would acknowledge that there are tens of thousands of Marylanders. Soon they're going to be hundreds of thousands. Even if this thing opens up in May, there are going to be hundreds of thousands of Marylanders whose lives are going to be, I think, altered for a long, long time. We're just not going to flip a switch and everything's going to go back to normal. These folks are going to be hurt. And I know there's 4 months of unemployment payments and all this kind of stuff. They're sacrificing an awful lot to flatten this curve. And we know from CDC, some of these folks are going to end up killing themselves. Some of these folks are going to end up substance abuse. Some of these folks are going to, suffer all kinds of angst and anxiety and all the social ills that go along with that are well documented. And I just wish the governor would recognize that sacrifice is going on as well. Of course, we should recognize the sacrifice of people like my sister who are heroically going through this. Of course, we don't want to see people, and everybody's life matters equally. I'm not saying, just because certain people are more vulnerable to this disease, we shouldn't try to save their lives. That's crap. I don't believe that. But, the burden of this, the sacrifice of this is not being spread evenly as well, and it won't be. So I like that we're all in it together and we're all this kind of stuff, but we're really not. And, that's the end of that. And I'll let you go.
Yeah, I think I think your tweets about this were, I don't want to say mischaracterized. I think you were right that the reporters who have tried to capitalize on this are trying to put a there and are trying to make division within the GOP and division within the Maryland GOP and division between leading conservatives and the Governor Hogan more of a thing than it really is. Obviously, the New York Times is interested because Governor Hogan has been one of the leading voices, particularly in his role with the National Governors Association and as a Republican who has contradicted the Trump administration on this. And I could go on all day about how much the Trump administration has let us down with their response. I think that a lot of people who are responding to what you said, I think a lot of people who are offended by what you said. Look, there's a room for this conversation. Just because I agree with what the governor is doing 100%. Okay. That doesn't mean that we can't have the conversation and that we should not consider, as you point out, the economic effects, the societal effects, the social effects, the health effects, the mental effects of unemployment, the long-term, this is going to have a long tail. I think that no matter what happened here, no matter what decision the governor made, there was going to be a long tail. Either you were going to have what we're having now, which is a government-imposed, for lack of a better term, shutdown of the economy for large sectors of the economy, or you were going to have a long tail from people getting sick and dying and overloading the hospitals and the societal issues that go there. I think and I know you don't want to talk about it necessarily, but I will defend you. I think what David Lublin over at the Seventh State, which I didn't even know still existed, what he did was BS. He just completely mischaracterized your tweets and tried to make a point that you weren't trying to make. He was trying to make the point that you said that the economic benefits were worse than the coronavirus itself, which is, I never suspected that was the point that you were making. I think he knows that. I think people forget that he exists, and he wanted to try to score a cheap shot on it.
I wasn't saying that, General. For some people, it will be, though. Let's be honest. For some people,
no, I agree.
Yeah,
for some people, it will be,
and it'll be a lot of people actually. But
yes, yeah. But clearly, what you were saying was not that, and that's the fact that David Lublin gets paid money to actually teach people is offensive to me. That's shows you what kind of professor that guy is.
And I told you at the time. And one of the reasons, I didn't go further with it was because the people who, when you get the tweet responses from people with at burn, those people disagreeing with me makes me feel like I'm on the right track. Okay.
Fair.
When our friend Scott Schaefer agrees with me, I feel like I'm on the right track. So I didn't, and if David Lublin disagrees with something I said, even if he has to mischaracterize it to make it look worse than it is, I feel like I'm probably on the right track. So I don't, I don't feel and we have this outlet, so
Right.
whatever. And again, the only reason Aaron Cox paid any attention, and of course she backed off immediately once I explained it in more detail, was because I was disagreeing with the governor, and that's the angle she was looking for, and that's the hole she was trying to put me in, and I wasn't going to play that game.
Of course. But we have to have these conversations because at some point there's going to be, once this is all said and done, once the economy reopens, once people go back to work, if they go back to work, as you point out, because some of these jobs are not going to be there. Some of these small businesses are never going to open their doors again. Right. And that really sucks.
And the layoffs aren't going to come back all at once. They're going to roll over as the economy grows. And
my point being is that there will be a cost to everybody on this, both like you said, the societal cost, law enforcement for issues like you talk about domestic violence, substance abuse, the societal cost. It was the Great Recession. If you look back at Appalachia, that's when opioids really took off in like the Ohio Valley, when the steel mills finally and started shutting down and they really got hurt. So there is going to be a nationwide societal effect there. Talking about substance abuse. Right. Look, unemployment, there will be bills to extend unemployment benefits past 4 months. It's going to happen.
At least through the election. Yeah.
Yeah. It will. And those benefits will be extended, like you said, at least through the end of the calendar year and probably farther.
And let's talk about that a little bit, because we'll have plenty of time to talk about it more. And we didn't bring it up with Senator Reedy. I mean, again, we could have talked 3 hours. And I hope Senator Reedy will come back. He was great. We could have him on every week. He could co-host the show if he wanted. Sounds like he has time. But the governor also mentioned in his press conference, the questions are, as much as we kind of dread the governor having press conferences because he never has any good news to announce, the questions that he gets asked tend to be really, really good questions. And one of the questions he was asked was, what did he think this was going to do to the state budget? Now, he kind of gave it the back of his hand and said, well, it's going to blow up the state budget. That's going to be, it's obvious to me, and this is not meant as a criticism, though I think it deserves to be noted. It's clear to me that the governor is very much in a bunker mentality with an extremely short-term horizon on his policymaking right now. Okay. He is making decisions that have long-term effects for very short-term policy gains. That's what he's doing. That's the choice that he's making. We're going to sacrifice long-term economic effects, negative economic effects, to keep that number of people getting infected and those needing hospitalization and ICU beds below our capacity. That's what we're doing. That's the trade-off that we're making.
Right.
And you can say that's great, that's wonderful, and if you're one of the people that's not going to suffer those effects so bad, or you're more likely to be one of those people that's going to be in the ICU bed, I would support it too. If you're not, maybe you have a different view. But that's the decision that he's making. And my point is, he's not thinking about long-term effect on the budget. 250,000 people on unemployment alone crashes the state budget.
Yeah.
Okay. The governor set aside $20 million from the rainy day fund for helping small business. I was on a conference call this week with attorneys. That's already gone. That was gone almost instantly. That's a drop in the bucket compared to the relief that companies are going to need. Congress can basically just print money and make up money. So they've spent $2 trillion. They'll probably end up spending another $3 or $4 trillion before this thing is done, especially in an election year. Wouldn't surprise me. That's somebody else's problem, another generation that nobody seems to care about. But the state can't do that.
Right.
So, I mean, the state budget is going to be a disaster. I mean, we touched on it with Senator Reedy. But when you look at spikes in the numbers needed for the social safety net, that's going to be necessary for unemployment, revenues going down because of the constriction of economic activity. All, by the way, a direct and proximate result of government action. You can say, but for that, something else would have happened. We'll never really know. But, we got to be honest with it. This is the decision the governor made to do this.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be real hard. I think we're going to be facing a really, really serious problem. And, again, getting things back open to mitigate that should at least be part of the discussion. And it concerns me that the governor thinks that that's not worthy of even thinking about right now.
Going along with your long-term discussion about the budget and how it's going to blow up the state budget, again, I point out, 83% of the state budget is mandated spending.
No, he's going to have the
Again,
legislature work with him on it. There's no question.
So again, the Democrats' insistence on passing mandated spending,
No.
knowing, I mean, I'm just saying, it's we're screwed at this point.
No,
It just also
run the state is absolutely wrong for this. Absolutely
right, and it again highlights the absolute recklessness and irresponsibility of passing Kerwin in the middle of all of this. And that's you can make an argument that the 83% mandated spending isn't as egregious because it was passed at a time in which everything was hunky-dory. Kerwin was passed in the middle of this damn thing.
Yeah.
When everybody knew that the shit was getting ready to hit the fan.
Yeah, here's the thing though. You're absolutely 1000% right. I think we may be getting to the point very soon where Kerwin's gone. Kerwin's just forget it. Everybody's going to say, forget it. You're right. That's a disaster. That was a bad idea. The governor vetoes it. We're just going to let it go. But we're still going to be in a disaster.
Yeah.
Where we're still going to have probably the most significant BRFA bill that we've ever seen, because we're going to have an economic constriction in this fiscal year that is unprecedented in our state's history. And I those are things I think about, because I guess I'm not so. Here's the other thing, and let's just end this discussion with this. Neither one of us are doctors. I know everybody in the world thinks they're a doctor. We hear all kinds of different things. I still believe, even though we're slowing the spread, we're bending the curve. I can read a graph. That x-axis, which is never labeled in most press reports, is time. Okay. The area under the low curve that's below the line of ICU capacity is the same area as the really high curve that goes above it. My point being, most of us are still going to end up getting this thing, right? The idea that we're somehow doing all this stuff is going to contain the virus, I don't even think that's legitimately the goal at this point.
I don't know.
The genie's out of the bottle.
I don't know.
We're only slowing the spread.
If you look at what happened, I mean, the Spanish flu is the most recent pandemic that we can really compare it to.
Okay.
And they actually, if you look at social distancing and that, which actually did happen, it really ramped down the curve of people getting sick in general.
Right.
But it also hit in 3 waves.
Right.
So I don't know, man. I just don't have an answer for that.
Well, we're
obviously
we're just like everybody else talking about this, but I think eventually from what I understand, before things go back to normal, okay, I mean, really get to normal, one of two things either has to happen: a vaccine that is widely distributed.
Yes.
Okay. Which is 12 to 18 months away from even being found.
No.
Or 2, enough. Well, that's what I hear. I don't know if that's, or enough people get it and survive it and build up an immunity to it that we have a populational immunity and things can go back to normal. One of those things have to happen. I don't think there's any question that more people have this and have had it, the disease that's run its course, than we're aware of.
I think that's true.
The testing protocol.
But again, that's completely speculative talk. We have absolutely no idea.
As the governor points out, he's flying blind. We're flying blind.
Everybody
don't have enough testing, and the people are. My understanding of the protocols of getting testing in this state is you have to have the symptoms. You have to go to a doctor, and you have to have been exposed to somebody who has it.
Yes.
Well, there's a lot of people who may have had it who don't fit into those categories. And still most of the tests are coming back negative. So, I mean, I don't know. I'd love to think if we did all this, nobody else would get sick, but I think we're all eventually going to get it. I can look at a graph. We're just spreading it out over a longer period of time, which is good because we won't have so many in the serious category that people are dying for want of care. Fine. But I still think we're going to get it.
Well, we'll see where we are next week when we do the show. It'll be interesting. I hope. I mean, think about it. We've gone now 3 days without a governor's press conference. So hopefully
That's a good start.
that's a good start.
Right?
Yeah. So we'll see. Do you want to take a break or you just want to go into the next?
Let's just keep going. By the way,
Right.
because I think it was humorous, the governor also announced that they got the Bay Bridge fixed 3 months ahead of whatever.
Yeah, can't imagine how that happened.
But you could hear the frustration. In a normal time, that would have been a huge achievement.
Yes.
And it's now so hollow because, I mean, most people can't drive over the bridge for, fear of being arrested and imprisoned. That,
Okay, it's not. Look, even the state has acknowledged that if you're not getting pulled, the people they're just going to pull people over.
I'm exaggerating slightly, but no one legally can drive over the bridge unless very few people have the legal right to drive over that bridge right now. Can we agree on that?
Legally, but yes, but who's going to enforce it?
The state police and all of us, the goodwill of us not to spread. My point is, it's not that big an accomplishment because most people can't take advantage of it.
Well, it's not that big of an accomplishment because we're in a global pandemic and we got bigger fish to fry.
Well, he can't get but I'm saying you can.
I understand your point. Yes, absolutely.
He wanted to really crow how great an achievement this was, but it is meaningless now because by the time we're able to appreciate it, it would have been the normal timeline. I found it amusing.
I don't know if it's to be that long, but I mean, it's a year in advance. But be that as it may,
okay.
Let's talk about election stuff now, okay? And
let's do that.
There's the election's coming. There's actually 2 elections coming. There's an election 4 weeks. That was weird. 4 weeks from today,
right?
And where the special general, in the 7th congressional district between Kwesi Mfume and Kim Klacik, the Republican nominee.
Mail in only.
And apparently everybody has their hands thrown in the air, not knowing how this is going to work. Now, we talked about this a little bit last week, where we talked about how the state board of elections
this morning on WNBA.
About how the state board of elections this is not a contingency that they necessarily planned for. A couple different things. One, you've got Democrats up in arms that there are not going to be at least some capability to vote in person.
Right.
Which is nuts to me. I mean, we talked about this last week. You talked about this, as you said, with Mike Bradley this morning.
Right.
The people who are working the polls are the high risk people to get
Generally
the disease.
Speaking, yeah, they're overrepresented among the high risk potential patients of this particular pandemic. Yes,
correct.
We can say that. Yes.
One of the reasons that Democrats are laying out as for why we need to have this in-person voting, and you want to talk about having long-term consequences of things where people don't think things out. One of the reasons, Greg, that they want to have these polling places open,
right?
Same-day voter registration.
Sure. Sure. Too clever by half. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, I understand that we got a lot of supporters of Ms. Klacik, who, by the way, don't add us on Twitter anymore, folks. We've invited her on the show. She was at our conference.
Yeah.
She's welcome anytime.
Yeah.
Okay. She's been invited. I swear to goodness, she's been invited and she's welcome anytime to come on the show. It's not for lack of asking that we've not had her on. Nobody really thinks that this is going to be that competitive a race. So
no,
and that's the only race that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And if anything, it provides some separation with the regular primary, which is now going to be in June, so that race can really be kind of more separate.
Right.
So every other candidate who refused to drop out of the special, it kind of gives them a little bit of a break, I think. particularly on the Republican side, because you don't have Kim Klacik talking about being the nominee and running in a primary at the same time, even though she'll probably still end up winning both.
No.
Okay, we'll see.
We'll see. So let me read you a little bit. Are you done? I'm sorry.
No. So all of this is of questionable consequence. But go ahead.
So yeah. So and now this letter, and we'll get back to that the primary, the special general in a second. The Democrats, they don't care about the April 28th election. They're all in calling for an in-person voting option for June 2nd. In a letter circulated to members of both chambers, Senate President Bill Ferguson and Speaker Adrienne Jones argued that voting is an essential activity akin to the work of essential businesses that have remained open despite severe restrictions Hogan has implemented during the pandemic. The state must explore potential options for in-person voting for a limited number of our citizens to ensure that we are demonstrating that democracy can still flourish in the midst of a public health emergency. Now, Greg.
Okay.
Maryland, and we've talked about this before, and I'm going to talk about it again. Maryland has had no excuse, no reason, full absentee voting. Anybody who wants an absentee ballot has been able to get an absentee ballot for years now.
Absolutely. You just ask, and you can vote by mail.
Just ask. All you have to do is go to the website.
Absolutely.
And ask them to send you an absentee ballot.
Absolutely.
So I'm not certain how we have to have in-person voting to allow democracy to flourish.
Well,
we have this avenue that's already available for people to vote.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said same-day registration. If you don't know that you wanted to vote until the day of and you weren't even registered, you can't retcon back to request a ballot time or have one sent to you automatically. So that's part of it. And look at the primary the regularly scheduled primary election in June does have some more consequence, particularly in the city of Baltimore.
Right.
Okay. Because those primary elections are going to be very impactful. And there's some folks walking around the city who might suddenly remember or be reminded that they wanted to vote on election day who otherwise might not have done so. So that's what this is really about. You know it, and I know it.
It's walking around money, folks.
Elections are, the rules decide the outcome of elections. We know that. Okay, so that's what this is about. And, I'm sure they can find some. And by the way, the two people who sent that letter, hey, they can convene a special session of the assembly and pass a bill if they wanted to. Linda Lamone, last time I checked, was a member of their own party.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're
life at this point.
Yeah, it's not like they're without options. Though it's interesting who now the really interesting thing was, who does this help the most? Obviously, I think some people are a little worried about a TJ Smith coming along and maybe winning this thing, or some outsider who might have the support of people who know how to get an absentee ballot or can vote by mail just fine. That's kind of my thinking, but I'm curious.
You really think that? You think that has a lot to do with it? Because I think it's got everything to do.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because look, the people. Let's face it. You talk about Baltimore City. The candidates and the campaigns that are going to use walking around money is not going to be T.J. Smith or Mary. Was it Mary Miller is her name, or any of these upstart Yeah. Well, I mean, he's got his own problems. Or any of these upstart city council candidates or anything like that. It's going to be people who are outsider candidates who have people who are motivated to vote for somebody. I don't think a lot of people going to the polls on election day are going to be motivated to vote for Sheila Dixon. I think they're going to remember there's an election and go vote for Sheila Dixon because they remember who she is and on a name identification basis. Whereas somebody who's going to vote for TJ Smith who already knows they're going to vote for TJ Smith is more likely to already know that and to be motivated to go make that choice, to put in that extra effort. It's got everything to do with it. And honestly, I bet you there are some legislators, to wit, Jill Carter, who was on the ballot in the 7th Congressional District, running for Congress,
Okay.
who has her own skin in the game,
Sure.
as far as trying to drum up turnout. Though obviously it didn't help her a whole hell of a lot in the regular special primary election, the one
Right.
that was held back in February. That didn't do much for her. I
Well,
think that I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, is the fact that the insiders
Absolutely.
know that they lose a little bit of control.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you change the rules, you change the game. And so having people who can walk up and vote, whether you're doing same day voter registration, whether you're doing traditional get out the vote efforts. If you're not watching the video, you can't see my air quotes.
Whatever do you mean?
If those are the tactics that are a central part of your campaign plan, then that goes out the window if you don't have polling places that people can go to. So
and we talked about this last week, where it completely changes your strategy.
Yeah. And really, if there wasn't a city election going on, an election in Baltimore City, if this were just congressional races, okay, and some school board around, I don't think there'd be this much consternation about it. But
it's not a coincidence that the two people circulating the letter are the two legislative leaders who both happen to be residents of Baltimore City.
Right.
You don't think that's not part of this?
So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because now's not the time to be making that argument. But you can't wait, because you can't wait till May to see if things open up a little bit and then make the decision, because you're not going to get the places stat. They have a hard time doing it anyway.
Yeah.
They don't even get Republican election judges anymore. I don't even know if they try. That's another issue.
I think they try, but I mean,
yeah,
I can tell you what they're doing in Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin did what they decided to do, because Wisconsin's presidential primary is on Tuesday, and they're actually sending the National Guard out as poll workers. That's not a message I think anybody enjoys, is now you've got armed people in military uniform.
Well, maybe that's the compromise the governor ought to offer and see if they take it. That would be a counter.
Yeah, okay, I don't see that.
All right, I'll send the National Guard out.
Yeah, that's a little too who'd you vote for, comrade, for me. The problem is that you're never going to make these people happy.
It worked for Lincoln.
Oh, God.
1864 worked real good. 62 and 64 worked real good. Changed the Constitution, everything. Just saying. There's a precedent for all of this in Maryland.
Touche.
Yeah.
You can't keep these people happy.
It's just politics. It's just politics. That's all it is. So we'll see. I think from our perspective, it's just fun to watch. There are going to be, people can get sick, and
yeah.
I think the Board of Elections is trying to keep people safe. That's what they're motivated by. They're not really worried about who wins the election, who doesn't, and that's not what politicians care about. So I think it'll be I don't think it'll be fun to watch, see what happens.
Yeah, apparently this level of confusion has also spilled over into the all-male special general election on April 28th in the 7th district, because
voting by mail only,
which is another vote by mail only. But apparently this is a story in the Sun that was posted yesterday afternoon.
Okay.
Apparently it wasn't until Wednesday that state officials said the mailing of ballots was underway. A social distancing at a print shop inside a state prison scuttled plans to print postcards advising voters of the changes to the upcoming elections, and decisions about the logistics of the special election day itself are still changing, delaying messaging from candidates that could be crucial for first-time voters. I heard, I don't know how nobody could know it's an all-mail election at this point. You're going to get the ballot in the mail. I don't understand what the
by mail. When you say all mail, that's a little confusing. It's voting by mail only.
Yes, a mail.
Yeah, it's not all mail.
Yeah, it's 1918 all over again. I kid. The mail only ballot.
Right.
I know that we don't have to play the clip. I sent you the clip. We're not going to play it.
All right.
I know Kim Klacik,
nominee, addressed this on the C4 show.
Yeah, and then it was very confusing because she said, "Oh, we don't know when the ballots are due back by." Well, it's right there on the website. It literally took me 5 seconds to find that information that ballots are due back 10 days after the close of polls, as long as they're postmarked by the close of polls at 8 p.m. on election day.
Right.
I don't understand why we have the Republican nominee for Congress going on a 50,000-watt radio station and couldn't figure out what day the ballots are due back when they're on the website.
Somebody between them could Google that answer pretty quick.
You would think that either that's bad staff work or a candidate who didn't do the legwork herself.
Maybe somebody could make a post at Red Maryland so that they
frustrating about that
in the future. And then we'll see how many people add us on Twitter. We're just trying to help, man. We're just trying to. You said she needs our help. We're helping.
Hey, those interviews with candidates in others districts that are not at all taking time away from voter contacts aren't going to do themselves. Making friends and influencing people, Greg.
You know, I said this to you off air. I'll say it on air. There, running for Congress to become a conservative media star is a proven business model in Maryland. So why not?
Hey,
why not?
Cash the check. Anyway,
okay. So what do we want to talk about now? Tiger King? When we talk about Tiger King?
Hold on. Let me one more thing.
Okay.
I wrote a post in Red Maryland talking about Alice Kane and her resignation from the House of Delegates.
Let's talk about this, yes.
And again, last year when we went through this, the Anne Arundel County Democratic Central Committee, once again, they had a meeting way outside of the district. They didn't let the public comment, and they kind of did it behind closed doors. Now they've got the same plan in place. Makes a little more sense this year, quite frankly. And now we don't even know if they're going to be able to meet in time, like have a real meeting that is even visible to the public to have the discussion about who is going to be nominated to fill this vacancy in District 38. On top of it, now we're going to have a situation in District 30A where the residents of that district will be represented by nobody who they voted for. You're going to have 2 members of the House in that district. Both of them have been appointed. One, of course, to fill Kane's resignation, and one who was appointed to replace the late Mike Bush last year. Right. And again, we've talked about these kind of issues for years. We've covered District 36, fiasco there, District 4 when Kelly Schultz resigned, District 5 when Justin Reedy was appointed to the state Senate. We've done all this stuff. And every time I feel obligated to mention that a special election would just fix all of this mess, particularly at a time where we've got 10 months now until the regular session of the General Assembly, at a time in which we're already, at least for this year, moving to a couple of all mail ballot, mail only ballot elections, which is is hopefully going to prove that concept is viable. Greg, I don't know.
Do you think that's a good concept?
All mail only.
I'm not a fan of all voting by mail only. I think
for a special election to fill a vacancy in the House
election. Look,
absolutely.
I don't know that I've always agreed with you on special elections. I do agree with you now, and it's not a panacea. No. But if anybody believes, and this is the thing that I have always said, look, if central committees pick the replacements, anybody who thinks those things are done transparently and openly in any situation, you're a dupe. You're a fool. You're a rube.
Right.
Okay. I've literally sat at the table where central committees have had the open to the public dog and pony show where they bring all the candidates in and they ask them questions and the public's there and they vote in front of the audience. It was decided outside of the sight of the people there. It was decided
before they walked in the room.
Yeah. It's no different than if they just got together, closed the door and made a decision. It's really not. And if you don't believe that, you're a rube. So if you're going to have central committees decide, it's going to be de facto a backroom, out of sight kind of decision. If you want it more open, there's certainly cons to special elections, but that's at least the voters who care enough to vote,
right,
going out and making the decision. That's at least transparent. And I know there was a bill in the legislature this year to kind of do that at a certain point in the term or something like that. But I agree with you. That's what we need to do. And what is it in Annapolis where elected officials at Annapolis just quit? What the hell is that all about? You've had like 2 members of the city, whatever they are, quit. One quit and then decided not to quit or something. And
Yeah.
now you've got a member of the House of Delegates from. I mean, what?
Yeah, because that was Mark Rodriguez of the Annapolis City Council, who happens to be the significant other of State Senator Sarah Elfreth, by the way, who quit to take a job in like Oregon, and then decided not to quit in the middle of of this pandemic code. I don't think his job was there anymore.
Yeah, the job offer wasn't there anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I agree. I think it is outrageous that people would run for public office, get elected, and then leave for any reason short of catastrophic health or death in the immediate family. I mean, if you were somebody who was willing to leave if you got a better offer, you should have never run for public office. I think it is absolutely outrageous. And Democrats don't seem to care about that kind of stuff. Because look, both of those people that we're talking about were elected in, Democratic years and Democratic areas, and they didn't have to try very. I mean, I love James Appel, who ran for that city council seat. He's like, I would have stayed. I mean, the district's probably he's outnumbered 8-1 or something. But there's just something about it that just it's disgusting.
Look, it's one, like you said, it's one thing.
Service. You can't talk about it being public service. You can't talk about it being noble, and then act like a what's the word I'm looking for? A hired gun, who's just mercenary.
Yeah.
In your approach. I mean,
look, like you said, there are legitimate reasons to do it. I think maybe in Alice Kane's situation, I think she mentioned there was an illness in the family.
Okay. All right.
So, but yeah, to run for office in less than 2 years, you're not even barely halfway through the term, right, and you're ready. You're not just quitting to take a new job. You're quitting to literally give up on the city. This joker is still on the city council.
Yeah.
And he was ready to leave the city. He doesn't give a shit about Annapolis.
He did not to do it when the offer fell through.
Yeah, it's like,
guy are you?
It's like, what kind of loser are you that you've already admitted, I don't care enough about this city to stay? But I'm still
when I get a better offer, I'm blowing this popsicle stand. I mean, and didn't they have another one who wasn't going to meetings and then quit down there?
Well, that was him.
He was
going to meetings too, and now he hasn't quit.
We got to get John Frenaye on and talk about what is wrong with these people, man. He needs to go down and slap some people.
Maybe John will run for mayor. He knows everybody.
John would be a step up from what they have now.
So would gum on the bottom of my shoe.
All right.
I haven't watched Tiger King.
You got to watch it, man. I know. And here's the thing about it. It's crazy. I mean, I watched it. I had the same. Everybody before I watched it. Oh, man, this is crazy. You got to watch it. It's so over the top. It is, and then some. You will think you have gone insane or are going insane. These are the absolute worst, most insane people that you'll ever see. Here's what's great about this, and it's unique. No one can spoil it for you, because I could not explain to you in full detail what is going on here. Okay. I could give you bits and pieces, but then I'd have to mention, oh yeah, by the way, there's this and there's that. And you're like, what? When you see it, you'll experience, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. It's a masterpiece of documentary filmmaking.
So one of the things that what I've heard about the show,
right?
What pictures I've seen about the show, and you can probably verify this for me.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm terrified. I'm going to look at some of these characters and be like, I know that person from such and such Central Committee.
No,
or I met this person.
No, you won't. You have not met people like this.
Okay.
If you have, I need to know that now, because I need to be on the list. These people are insane. Okay. As soon as you start to think you know who these people are, they come boom. Like the most normal character, in my opinion, on the show is the transgender man who had his arm ripped off by a tiger, who, instead of spending 2 years getting it reconstructed, told him to go ahead and amputate it because he didn't want the bad press for the zoo. That's the most normal guy on the show. Okay. and it was a woman,
What?
referred to as a woman, but she's a transgender man. So I don't want to be politically incorrect. That's the most. Yeah, exactly.
hold on.
That reaction that you
what?
just had. I mean, I understand all those words, but that sentence didn't make any sense. That's your reaction through the whole thing. I'm telling you.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
I'm telling you.
it's not on my calendar for this weekend because it's WrestleMania weekend. So
Okay. All right. And you can't watch it with the kids, but when they go to sleep and you feel like, you know what, sanity isn't all that fun, pop that on. And I mean, by episode 3, I was really questioning whether there is a God, because these people, there's a scene, and again, you can't ruin it because I can't give you the full flavor of it by explaining to you.
right.
There's a scene in the movie. The lead character, this Joe Tiger guy, is married to a guy. It's a lot more complicated than that. You're still going to be shocked and surprised. That's not even a spoiler.
How hard is that? What?
Guy kills himself, and you don't see him kill himself, but it's witnessed live. You see the shot of a guy watching him do it live.
What the fuck?
Yeah, okay. That's not even half of the guy who saw it was Joe's campaign manager when he ran for governor of Oklahoma. See, right
Wait,
away.
what?
Yeah, exactly. That's this. I'm telling you,
Oh,
that's like this much of what you're going to find.
my head
They have
just exploded.
Exactly. That is the reaction you're going to have throughout this. They had a funeral for this kid who seemed like a nice kid. They're having a funeral for this kid. His mom's there. She's a piece of work too. They're all strung out on meth. Have to be. Joe starts singing a country song. Yes. And there are videos. Yes. At the funeral, they all start singing along. This guy killed himself because he felt Joe tortured him and kept him captive, and he couldn't stand it anymore. And the mother's singing along with the song. It is the craziest thing that I have ever seen. And I wanted to just reach through the television at that scene and just slap every single one of these people. These are the worst human beings that I have ever seen. And by the way, you hear these people say this chick from Florida definitely killed her. I mean, even OJ thinks she killed her husband and fed him to the lions.
Well, he is an expert.
Totally agree. You will totally agree when you watch this. And that's not even to mention the guy in South Carolina who's got a cult of women who love him for his tigers. That it doesn't even start. I can't ruin it for you. That doesn't even spoil it for you.
True or false? This show got popular because it's batshit crazy at a time in which everybody's stuck at home.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair.
I think it is, you know me, I watch a lot more of this sort of thing than you do. It's the craziest goddamn thing I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
By a mile.
Wow.
By a mile. That reaction you had, just me explaining it to you, multiply that times 100. That is what you were going through this.
True or false? I should have, if I decide to watch this, I should have an adult libation.
No. Do it sober.
Oh no.
Do it sober. It'll enhance the experience. No, you don't want to dull the senses because you'll miss something. Because your reaction is going to be, wait, what? And you need your wits about you, because it's good. There are many times when I was watching this where I had to pause it and say, what?
Wow.
Wait, what?
Well,
Yeah.
we finished the much tamer first season of The Politician. So
Yeah.
I
Okay.
recommend it. I recommend it.
By the way, this is a segment every podcast has to have now because
Yes.
this is the world we're living in.
Yes. I don't know what we're going to start next. Obviously, it's a big wrestling.
We finished. You got your wrestling. And by the
Yeah.
way, if people haven't checked out JB's Drive-In podcast, where
Yes.
you talk a lot about wrestling before you ever get to the movie that you review.
I think every time I go on that show, it takes us about an hour to actually start talking about the movie.
Yeah. So
In this case, it's a plus because the movie's a piece of trash.
there's a lot of wrestling talk, and you and Paul really know your stuff. Jimmy's kind of interested in it. But
Oh,
when
Jimmy knows. I mean, Jimmy's the only one of us who actually was a pro wrestler.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't get me started on Jimmy Braswell. We could do a 3-part series on Jimmy Braswell. Okay. Don't get me started on that. That's for next time. But
Pasadena Tiger King.
he'd have to work, as crazy as he is nothing. Nothing. He's a choir boy compared to this.
That's true, though. Jimmy's our friend. Jimmy's good people.
Jimmy's great people. He's great people. So we finished the most recent season of Ms. Maisel, which was pretty good. I don't know if you watched.
Never watched it.
On Amazon. That's
Heard of it, not watched it.
It's a good one. We're still plowing our way through The Simpsons. They're still pretty good. We got into season 15, and we're like, some of these are still pretty good. So we're making our way through that. I watched all of. Didn't I give you the reco last week for Brockmire?
Yes, I
Okay.
haven't touched it yet. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another one for when the kids go to bed. That one you can have with a drink, you'll be fine. So those are the big. I watched on Stars. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Thought it was this incredible movie. Meh. It was.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
It was okay. It was overhyped.
I'm
It
sure.
wasn't terrible, but there's not really much of a plot. Okay. I'm not gonna tell you what it was because I would ruin it for you if I told you what happened. Because there's really only one kind of thing that really happens and it kind of unfolds and it's not really that interesting when you realize what's going on. So there you go. So wrestling, what else are you watching?
That's all we got time to watch right now. I mean, it's like this is WrestleMania weekend. We've got SmackDown tomorrow night. We've got night 1 of WrestleMania on Saturday, night 2 of WrestleMania on Sunday, and then Raw on Monday. So there's a lot of wrestling going on. Now, at this point, it's all been pre-taped, basically. And obviously, they split WrestleMania from a one-night, 7-hour show, which would have been Sunday night down at where the Bucks play in Tampa. And now it's a 2-night show, hosted both nights by Rob Gronkowski, by the way, who recently signed a lucrative contract. Well, he signed with the WWE. He's going to become a wrestler.
Sure. Why not? Why not? I mean, he'll probably be great at it. Why not? He's a personality.
Hey, I mean, Goldberg. It worked for Goldberg. Goldberg's 53 years old, and he's defending the title at WrestleMania. So,
and he's great on the TV show The Goldbergs.
You've told me that
as the coach's brother. Yeah.
The last time we talked about Goldberg being Universal Champion, we talked about that. But
yeah, well, he's on the most recent season, so I probably saw.
I don't know at this point how much longer they're going to be able to go on. They shut down. They shut down Orange County, Florida, where they taped the stuff last Thursday. So I don't know how much they got in the can. AEW had to move their stuff out of Jacksonville because they were using the amphitheater attached to where the Jaguars play because the company's owned by the Jaguars owner. Duval County, Florida turned that into a testing station. So they had to leave, and now they're doing stuff someplace else. And I don't know how much more we're going to have. I think we're going to be stuck at this point with the NASCAR e-racing series here. That's going to be the only athletic achievement that we're going to have going on.
I listen to GMD and I hear them do the racing report. And I'm like, well, they're not racing, but it's.
Oh, they are racing though.
But so the drivers are doing it virtually. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah. So what they're doing is you've got the two guys, Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon, are doing play-by-play, appropriately socially distanced in Charlotte. The guys are because there's a system called iRacing, which is like, think of it, you just race, you have a computer, you race through the computer. There's a server somewhere, and everybody's in the same race. And these guys it's hilarious because some of these guys are like playing on a USB controller plugged into a laptop. Some of these guys have $50,000 rigs that they created specifically for this, that have 3 screens and the cage and the seat, like they're in their NASCAR, and all this other. It's ludicrous how much money they'll spend on this stuff, but it's actually real racing. Well, you get like one race.
Esports are more real than any other sports going on right now.
Well, exactly. I mean, the only thing we got going on right now is the fact that I think the Taiwan Baseball League is going to start April 11th, and I'm trying to figure out if there's a way I can watch those games because I need a fix. I need my baseball fix. Okay. I'm struggling, man. I'm struggling. I'm struggling. And look, they already are talking about how when baseball goes back, that there may be a period where they go back with no people.
No crowd, you mean?
With no crowd, yeah. That they may go back. And then Peter Schmuck actually had an interesting column in the Sun the other day talking about how, once they do open things up like that again, are people going to want to go? Are they going to want to be that close to people? Well, I think they will.
there's going to be some pent up demand. I think there is some pent up demand, which is why the government has to impose. I think places where the government hasn't required this kind of stuff, people have.
Well, look at Florida this past weekend. In some of those counties.
So if some people won't and shouldn't, frankly, but others will want to, and if the government says it's okay, they'll go out. Yeah, I think there'll be some pent up demand. But, there'll also be a lot of people. Justin mentioned sales are kind of down for him. My wife's seen this. People don't know what's going to happen, so they're kind of holding on to their money. But like you say, people want to go to a baseball game, and they're willing to take some risk. I mean, let's be honest, getting back to this ain't the bubonic plague in the sense that, the vast majority of people who even get this, and I still think most of us will still end up getting, and I think the infection rate is still going to be the 40-70% that they predicted. It's just going to take a year or a year and a half instead of 6 months. Most people are going to, and I'm not downplaying its seriousness, and I'm not saying some people will always be perfectly fine, or that you or I or anybody couldn't get a serious hit of this thing. I certainly don't want to get it. I don't want to give it to anybody else, but
same.
More people are going to be willing to take that risk, I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Like, obviously, we have that, partial season ticket holders of the Orioles.
Right.
Look, and I think it depends on where we are as a country, where we are with the pandemic once they open things back up.
Right.
Will we go? I don't know. I mean, it's like I would like to think we would if it's safe. But there are reasons not to go too.
I think it'll depend on the sport. I mean, and maybe some of that's rational, maybe it's not. Yeah.
Look, I'm not worried about bumping into people.
The reaction to the NBA might be different.
Well, that's true.
To the because a lot of those guys seem to have it. I haven't heard any MLB players who have it. So
I think there was one minor leaguer before they shut the camps down, and that was it. Also, let's be fair. Not really worried about getting that close to people in the stands at an Orioles game.
Well, there exactly.
There's something to be said about that
too.
too.
Social distancing, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I just when baseball came, particularly baseball, because that was really the only professional sport happening. Baseball and college football were the big two sports at the time.
Right.
When they came back from the Spanish flu, there were these same concerns about whether or not people were going to go back, and people came back in droves. They came back as soon as they
had
could.
Netflix back then, so they were more stir crazy then.
That is a fair point.
They really needed it more.
But so we'll see. I think the economic question, as you point out, is just as big a concern as anything else. Though baseball, people still went to baseball games during the Depression too. They found ways to go and saved up and and stuff like that. I mean, it's funny because night baseball happened because of the Depression, because there were people working and they wanted to have the people who were working, they wanted them to be able to actually pay to go to the game.
Right.
And they saw it as a novelty. Oh, let's play baseball at night. And now, of course, every game's at night. So
yeah, adversity causes change, and there'll be a lot of things that will be different when we come.
There will be things that are different. There are things that stay the same. Yeah, I mean, it's
movie theaters were struggling before. I don't necessarily see people run into a movie theater anytime in the near future.
No,
even if they are back open, I think people are going to be a little, especially on opening night, the crowded theater. I was never a big fan of that to begin with, but now, I mean, I haven't
been to the movies. I think I've told you this before. I haven't been to the movies since 2012 because it's expensive.
Les Miserables.
And mainly that's because it's expensive. I mean, it's like, why am I going to pay for a movie that I'm not sure I'm going to like?
Right.
When I can just wait a couple of months and get it on Netflix or Amazon or whichever one it's got.
But even if you paid, and I think the going rate for first run movies right now, pay-per-view is maybe $20.
Yeah.
It's still $20 in your house where you don't have to pay another $40 for snacks. Still probably a better deal.
And you can pause it if you got to go to the can or something like that.
Yeah,
you don't climb over people and you have to park.
Studios make as much money. Yeah, so that's one industry I think. Here's one I did want to ask you about. I know we're running long here tonight. We're heading.
We have nothing else to do.
It's true. It's true. Sad but true. We're coming up on Maryland Podcast Month.
Sure.
I'm hearing, and I was a little surprised by this, but I guess it goes with my listening habits are a little different than a lot of people. Podcasts really being hit hard, not just by wholesale cancellations of advertising, but listenership's way down too, because so many people listen to them on their commute or in the gym, two things people don't do so much anymore.
And look, I listen to podcasts in the car. I listen to podcasts when I'm working out. I'm actually not, when I go for my walks or I'm just going outside to exercise now and I'm listening to something, I'm listening to music because I'm fortunate because while I'm working at home, I actually have a chance to catch up on all my podcasts because whereas when I'm at the office, I can't necessarily listen and work because there's a lot of other things going on and stuff like that. So I actually listened to 5 different podcasts today. Including, by the way, a new one that you might enjoy, This Day in Esoteric Political History, which is a very short, like 10-minute podcast, basically about what happened on this day. And the one for today was when Woodrow Wilson got the Spanish flu. The one yesterday was the anniversary of when Lyndon Johnson decided he wasn't running for re-election. So just that sort of stuff. It's a very short, like 10-minute show, and I think it comes out every day or every other day.
By the way, but
2 of the worst presidents. Woodrow Wilson being the worst.
No argument here. No argument here. The worst. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
it's interesting. Yeah, and it's nice to get.
Fortunately, we're not part of that because 1, our ratings are actually up, believe it or not, and two, nobody pay. We don't make any money anyway. So
it's not money making.
It's not like we're.
Though we did pick up. I do want to publicly acknowledge.
Yes, thank you.
Patron on Patreon.com/Red Maryland. Our
insurance commissioner.
Our insurance commissioner. Yes.
Al Redmer. Yeah.
I wasn't gonna. Yes. Al Redmer. Thank you. Commissioner Redmer,
we appreciate it.
I'm a patron. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
We appreciate Corinne and Tim and Jim and all the other people who are
and
have supported us for a long time.
Beginning of the month, and we owe you some patron exclusive content. There's a lot on there already on our Patreon.com/Red Maryland page, Commissioner. If you want to go check it out, you can hear the whole story about us on the Baltimore Sun, but. We appreciate that we have picked up some new listeners, viewers, watchers, wherever you're checking us out. So we definitely appreciate that.
And that's been one of the benefits of us simulcasting this show on Facebook Live.
Well, we'll never be in the same studio again.
At this point, no.
Yeah. Get used to that. This is not going to change.
But so many people now are home.
I may have a mullet in another month.
I'm this close to finding a pair of clippers and buzzing it, man.
I've looked at Flobies on Amazon. I
actually got my hair cut by a Flobie once. I was in high school.
You told me this story. I
was in high school. I was in high school and she was cute. That was basically
Waka waka.
Very much.
Yeah, no. When haircuts are outlawed, only outlaws will have haircuts. So I'm definitely not an outlaw.
I'm
tempted to get the dry cleaning done I want. Just saying. I don't have anywhere to go and dress clothes, but if I did, I could get them dry cleaned, no problem.
Yeah, right.
You don't make
it's funny because I haven't actually had a buzz cut like that short since I was in like 1993. I was like 14. So it's been a long time since I've gone down that route. And at some point I just may break and just do it. Either that or I'll like dye my hair purple. I mean, what else?
Well, that's okay. I don't know anybody who this applies to, but I have a feeling if we really are staying in place and non-essential businesses like hair places are closed, we're going to find we're going to find out a lot of people's natural hair color, frankly.
Oh yeah.
There is a brewing disaster going on, and I can
not for me.
I understand. Me neither. No, why would I dye it this color, for God's sake? If anything, the beard I should dye gray because it looks uneven, and the right light looks like I have a Hitler mustache. It's crazy, but
I think some people think you do.
Some probably do. Yeah. Well, that's why the New York Times called me. But that's one thing that I'm not sure folks on the second floor truly appreciate. I mean, when you have some sort of breaking point with certain demographics, hair color returning to a natural state. I think the first thing we'll see get opened up on the essential businesses will be cosmetology and hair cutting places. I would bet a lot of money on that.
You're probably right.
I bet there's a lot of people who, even in the bunker, probably need that service on a fairly regular.
Are you? I think I get what you're putting down here.
Not the main guy.
I know.
Yeah, the people around him.
I know.
Just saying. Maybe even cabinet members. Just saying. Just saying. Not judging.
So I've never done that
for a lot of people. That's all.
Have you ever dyed your hair?
No, and no, I've there.
I didn't know if this was some weird frat thing you did. You might have had to do it.
No. I've thought about dyeing the beard because it is colored unevenly, and I do need
Yes.
to trim it. I can do that. There, I have no excuse for that. But I've thought about first off, I have no problem being gray. I've had gray hair since I was 17 years old, and then I married my wife, so it was going to go gray. But now I'll know if she listened this far into the podcast. But it is kind of uneven, and I've thought about trying to even it out.
Right.
But then you got to keep up with it, and then you got to keep doing it. And
see, that's one reason why. That's one reason I shaved this off. I've shaved it off since the last time we did a show. I didn't have time to shave it today. I was going to, because all this for the most part is its natural color. Okay. And that's great. There are some onesies and twosies here, whatever. This
young man,
I'm 40 now. So, this is very white when it's there. So that's not acceptable. But as I've always said, I don't care if it's gray or not, as long as it's there. I'm already on borrowed time. It's like, as far as
not a problem I'll ever have. I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, as far as hair goes, it's like if it's supposed to run in the maternal line of your family. My grandfather on my mom's side was almost bald by the time he was 37. So I'm already on borrowed time as far as that goes. So as long as it's there, it can be gray, white, whatever. I don't care. But I'm vain. I'm not that kind of vain.
I think
makes sense.
I think that's a great place to end the show on right there. Let's wrap it up.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Special thanks again to State Senator Justin Reedy for joining us and being so generous with his time tonight. Programming note, we will be on Wednesday next week because it is Holy Week next week. It ain't going to feel like it, but it's Holy Week next week. So I will be watching. I will not be attending. I will be watching the Holy Thursday liturgy.
Right.
That is that will be broadcast live from our church on Facebook, who I believe has finally learned how to shoot in landscape, which is an exciting development. After 2 weeks of mass in portrait mode.
It's a process.
God love them for doing it in the first place. You know what I mean? So we thank everybody for that. Again, next Wednesday night, 8 p.m. here on the Red Maryland Network. Be sure that you're tuning into redmaryland.com. All things Red Maryland. I've got my latest piece today about Kerwin. I've read about Alice Kane. My piece from last week about Alan McCarthy blew up. I got a lot of attention for that. In Cecil County, which, as Greg will tell you, was its own little world. Facebook.com/
I would. It's true.
Facebook.com/Red Maryland. We are on Twitter @Red Maryland and Instagram @Red Maryland. On social media, please follow us, share us, like us, and share our content with all your friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, co-religious, in-laws, and outlaws. Share them on your Facebook groups, on Nextdoor. Everybody's on the internet right now. You can be a force multiplier in growing everything that we are doing here at Red Maryland and fighting the good fight for conservatism in the state of Maryland. If you want to get in touch with us, redmaryland@gmail.com is the email address, or you can call or text the Red Maryland Talkback line, 410-205-4875.
What's that number?
410-205-4875, and we will feature your comments on a future episode of Red Maryland Radio. Greg, any final thoughts?
We're all in this together, Brian.
Yes, we are.
There you go. That's my
You gonna get takeout this weekend?
I actually went to the grocery store and we're pretty well stocked up, but I may, just because, again, We're all in this together.
Yeah, we're trying to go once a week at this point. To
That would
frequent
be normal for me. So I'm trying to.
fair. We've gone since Sunday, so that's pretty good. We went twice last week, but whatever. At some point you just need something. Actually, last Sunday it was like I need a hamburger. That's what I really needed in my life. So what?
That's what you need.
We only did that once though. And remember, I stocked up before all this started. The day after the governor's state of emergency declaration, I was at the liquor store. Papa ain't no fool.
Good night, folks.
For everybody here at the network, for Greg, I'm Brian. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Red Maryland Radio on the Red Maryland Network.